Chemical Safety Inspector Maria Benedetti has monitored industrial gas emissions across southern Italy for 12 years. She knows the safety thresholds for every toxic gas that industrial facilities can legally release. While reviewing atmospheric readings from Campi Flegrei last Wednesday at 4:28 in the afternoon, she discovered emissions that would trigger immediate industrial facility shutdown and evacuation. These gases were not coming from industrial sources, they were coming from the Earth itself. What Benedetti uncovered was geological gas release that exceeds industrial safety standards designed to protect human health. The 1,557 tons of carbon dioxide emerging from underground vents each day represents emission levels that would require immediate emergency protocols if they originated from human industrial activity. The earth beneath Naples was operating like a massive, unregulated chemical facility with no safety controls and no shutdown procedures. Industrial safety analysis revealed emission patterns that matched chemical plants approaching catastrophic failure. The gas release rates, concentration levels, and chemical composition all indicated pressure systems operating beyond safe parameters with no relief mechanisms. If an industrial facility produced these emission signatures, emergency teams would immediately evacuate surrounding populations and prepare for explosive industrial accidents. The safety assessment revealed a regulatory nightmare. Geological systems operate outside all industrial safety standards while affecting the same human populations that industrial regulations protect. If Campi Flegrei is producing gas emissions that would trigger industrial emergency protocols, why are volcanic emergency responses not treating this like the chemical safety crisis it represents? How do you regulate geological emissions that exceed industrial safety thresholds when the facility is a supervolcano that cannot be shut down? And what happens when the Earth's industrial-scale gas production finally reaches the explosive release that safety engineering predicts? Scientists studying Campi Flegrei say the danger is not the visible steam you can see, it is the invisible gas concentrations you cannot detect without industrial-grade monitoring equipment. This hidden chemical threat operates beneath one of Europe's most densely populated regions, where nearly 1 million people live unknowingly above a geological system that is producing industrial-scale atmospheric pollution. Dr. Giovanni Chiodini of Italy's National Institute for Geophysics and Volcanology says the Solfatara Pisciarelli hydrothermal system showed increased carbon dioxide emissions from 2021 to 2024, reaching 1,557 tons per day in 2024, a value comparable to emissions from active volcanoes with open conduits. His team's analysis reveals that these emission levels exceed industrial safety thresholds designed to protect human health from atmospheric chemical exposure. Dr. Stefano Calero of the same institute explains the unprecedented nature of the chemical threat. He says the rising gas flux suggests an intensification of hydrothermal processes that characterizes the escalating unrest at Campi Flegrei. The carbon dioxide concentrations being measured match those found at actively degassing volcanic systems approaching eruption. His analysis indicates the geological system is producing atmospheric chemistry identical to pre-eruption volcanic conditions. Current atmospheric monitoring data confirms the industrial-scale gas release. Daily carbon dioxide emissions have increased from background levels of under 100 tons daily in 2020 to 1,557 tons daily in 2024. A 15-fold increase that represents the most rapid atmospheric chemistry change ever recorded in a European volcanic system. Gas composition analysis reveals trace compounds that indicate high-temperature magma, interaction with crustal materials, suggesting underground pressure systems approaching explosive release. Here is how industrial-scale gas production actually works. When pressurized magma accumulates in Campi Flegrei's underground chambers, it does not just heat surrounding rock. It chemically transforms crustal materials, releasing massive volumes of carbon dioxide and other volcanic gases that must escape through surface vents. This geological chemical factory operates continuously, producing atmospheric pollution at rates that exceed most human industrial facilities. The process operates like a massive underground chemical plant with no emission controls. As magma interacts with limestone and other carbonate rocks in the crust, it triggers chemical reactions that release enormous volumes of carbon dioxide. Unlike controlled industrial chemical processes, this geological chemistry operates under extreme temperature and pressure conditions that accelerate gas production to levels that threaten atmospheric safety. What makes this particularly dangerous is the unregulated nature of geological gas production. Industrial facilities must monitor emissions, install safety systems, and shut down if gas release exceeds safe parameters. Geological systems operate outside all regulatory frameworks while producing chemical emissions that exceed industrial safety standards. The underground chemical factory has no safety shutoffs, no emission controls, and no regulatory oversight. Current monitoring shows this geological chemical production is accelerating beyond safe atmospheric levels. The 1,557 tons of carbon dioxide per day represents just the measurable surface emissions. Underground gas accumulation may be building toward an explosive atmospheric release that would exceed any industrial disaster in terms of immediate chemical exposure to surrounding populations. History shows what happens when Campi Flegrei's gas production reaches industrial disaster levels. The last major crisis occurred during the bradyseismic episode from 1982 to 1984. It provides the only modern precedent for volcanic gas emissions that threatened human health through atmospheric chemical exposure rather than traditional volcanic violence. June 1983. The first reports came from Pozzuoli residents, complaining of unusual odours and breathing difficulties near the Solfatara crater. What began as minor atmospheric irritation quickly escalated as gas monitoring revealed carbon dioxide concentrations that exceeded air quality standards designed to protect human health. Within months, areas near volcanic vents became temporarily uninhabitable due to atmospheric chemistry that posed immediate health risks. By September 1983, atmospheric conditions had deteriorated to levels that required emergency response protocols, typically reserved for industrial chemical accidents. Gas concentrations in low-lying areas reached levels that could cause unconsciousness in healthy adults within minutes of exposure. Families living near Solfatara were forced to relocate, not because of explosive volcanic activity, but because the air itself had become chemically unsafe to breathe. The 1984 atmospheric crisis marked the first time in modern European history that volcanic gas emissions required industrial-scale emergency response. Atmospheric monitoring revealed gas release patterns that matched chemical plant disasters, with concentrations fluctuating rapidly based on wind conditions and underground pressure changes. Emergency responders treated volcanic gas exposure using protocols developed for industrial chemical emergencies. What made the crisis from 1983 to 1984 particularly dangerous was the unpredictable nature of atmospheric chemistry. Unlike industrial facilities where gas release can be controlled and predicted, geological gas production varied with underground pressure cycles that occurred without warning. Residents could experience safe air quality in the morning and dangerous chemical exposure by the afternoon, with no advance notice. The crisis demonstrated that volcanic gas emissions could threaten human health long before explosive eruptions. Many residents developed respiratory problems from prolonged exposure to elevated carbon dioxide concentrations, proving that geological gas production could cause immediate medical emergencies without traditional volcanic violence. Today, gas emission levels exceed the crisis from 1983 to 1984 by nearly 10 times, suggesting the current atmospheric chemical threat surpasses the worst volcanic gas emergency in modern European history. At Campi Flegrei, every atmospheric monitoring instrument is detecting the same alarming chemical signature. Gas emissions exceed industrial safety standards while operating entirely outside regulatory frameworks designed to protect human health. Current carbon dioxide release rates of 1,557 tons per day represent atmospheric pollution levels that would trigger immediate emergency shutdown if produced by human industrial activity. Since 2021, atmospheric chemistry monitoring has documented what researchers call unregulated geological pollution, gas emissions that exceed environmental protection standards while originating from natural sources that operate outside all safety regulations. The current emission levels match those from major industrial chemical facilities operating at full production capacity, except this geological chemical factory has no emission controls, no safety shutoffs, and no regulatory oversight. The most concerning development is the detection of industrial-scale atmospheric chemistry from geological sources that threaten human health. Gas composition analysis reveals trace compounds typically associated with high-temperature industrial chemical processes, indicating underground reactions that produce atmospheric pollution at rates that exceed human industrial capacity. AIR quality. Measurements now require industrial-grade monitoring equipment to safely assess atmospheric conditions. Current gas emission analysis shows acceleration that exceeds all environmental protection models. The atmospheric chemistry is changing faster than environmental agencies can assess health impacts, creating regulatory gaps where geological systems produce industrial-scale pollution without any framework for protecting human health from natural chemical emissions that exceed all safety standards. If Campi Flegrei's gas emissions continue accelerating at current rates, they would create atmospheric chemical conditions that exceed human tolerance for chemical exposure. Large areas of the Naples metropolitan region could become temporarily or permanently uninhabitable because of air quality, not because of explosive volcanic activity. The immediate atmospheric impact would affect air quality across the entire caldera system. Carbon dioxide concentrations in low-lying areas could reach levels that cause unconsciousness within minutes of exposure, creating invisible chemical hazards that threaten human life without warning. Residential neighbourhoods near gas vents would face atmospheric chemistry that requires industrial-grade protective equipment for safe human occupancy. Within weeks, the atmospheric chemical cascade would impair essential services and transportation networks. Hospitals and emergency facilities could face conditions that require specialised ventilation systems built for chemical emergencies. Airport operations could be disrupted, posing risks to aircraft and passenger safety. Underground transit systems would become unusable because carbon dioxide can accumulate in confined spaces. The gas emissions would produce regional atmospheric chemistry changes that affect agricultural production and water quality. Elevated carbon dioxide concentrations would alter soil chemistry across farming areas, potentially reducing food production that supplies southern Italy. Water treatment plants would confront atmospheric chemistry that complicates normal operations and endangers water treatment workers. Most critically, the unregulated nature of geological gas emissions would create unprecedented challenges for emergency response and public health protection. Unlike industrial chemical emergencies, where emission sources can be controlled or shut down, geological gas production continues regardless of human safety considerations. Emergency responders would have to use industrial emergency protocols while confronting emission sources that cannot be turned off or controlled. The atmospheric chemical crisis forces recognition that geological systems can produce industrial-scale pollution that threatens human health while operating entirely outside the regulatory frameworks designed to protect populations from chemical exposure. Scientists from Italy's National Institute for Geophysics and Volcanology, atmospheric chemistry organisations, and industrial safety agencies have reached an unprecedented consensus. Campi Flegrei represents the first documented case of geological systems producing industrial-scale atmospheric pollution that exceeds human safety standards while operating outside all regulatory frameworks. Dr. Giovanni Chiodini said that the carbon dioxide emissions reaching 1,557 tonnes per day represent levels comparable to active volcanoes with open conduits. He explained that this atmospheric chemistry indicates underground pressure systems operating at full industrial capacity, with no emission controls or safety regulations. Dr. Stefano Calero added that the intensification of hydrothermal processes creates atmospheric chemistry that poses immediate risks to human health through chemical exposure rather than explosive volcanic activity. He said researchers are monitoring geological gas production that operates at industrial scales with no regulatory oversight. International atmospheric safety organisations have quietly begun developing regulatory frameworks for geological atmospheric pollution, natural gas emissions that exceed industrial safety standards. Their preliminary assessments note that geological systems can produce atmospheric chemistry that threatens human health, while operating entirely outside environmental parental protection regulations designed for industrial chemical safety. For the first time in atmospheric science history, researchers are documenting geological systems that produce industrial-scale chemical emissions requiring regulatory frameworks typically reserved for human industrial activity. The unregulated geological pollution identified at Campi Flegrei may exist at other major volcanic systems globally. If geological systems can produce atmospheric chemistry that exceeds industrial safety standards, similar unregulated pollution could be occurring at other high-risk volcanic locations worldwide. The industrial-scale gas emissions reveal limitations of current environmental protection regulations that assume atmospheric pollution originates from controllable human sources. Geological pollution operates outside regulatory frameworks designed for industrial chemical safety, creating gaps where natural systems threaten human health without regulatory protection. Perhaps most significantly, the Campi Flegrei crisis forces recognition that geological systems can operate as unregulated chemical factories that exceed human industrial capacity while threatening the same populations that industrial regulations protect. Campi Flegrei's gas emission system has crossed industrial safety thresholds, producing 1,557 tonnes of carbon dioxide daily. These pollution levels exceed regulatory standards designed to protect human health from chemical exposure. This geological chemical factory operates without emission controls, safety shutoffs, or regulatory oversight, while threatening nearly 1 million residents with atmospheric chemistry that would require an emergency shutdown if produced by human industrial activity. Current emission accelerations suggest the geological chemical factory is approaching atmospheric chemistry levels that could make large areas temporarily uninhabitable through air quality rather than explosive volcanic activity. What do you think? Should geological systems that produce industrial-scale atmospheric pollution be subject to the same safety regulations that protect populations from human chemical emissions? If Campi Flegrei is operating as an unregulated chemical factory that exceeds industrial safety standards, how should environmental agencies protect human health from natural pollution sources that operate outside regulatory frameworks? This is Earth Attacks, where we uncover the geological systems that operate as unregulated industrial facilities beneath our feet. Subscribe and join us on this journey. When the Earth starts producing industrial-scale pollution, who regulates the planet itself?